This now going live on YouTube. Looks good. So if you go to the YouTube channel for the Ontology Summit, you should see what you see here. Just a little delayed. I need to open up the
Good morning, Ken. Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome.
Morning.
Good morning. How are you? I was trying to read your name. It's too small a font for my computer. I'm
Sorry
Ravi.
about it.
I'm
Nice to
Ravi
meet you, Ravi.
Sharma.
I'm not famous. I'm mainly a blogger. I guess my name is Jake Waz, but I use my blog
Every-
is. Yeah.
Everyone who is interested in ontology or related subjects is welcome. And so
Thank you,
Yes.
we
very kind.
welcome you. Yes. And thank you, Ken, for doing this. I'm in
So,
LA just for today. Next week I'll be in Elgrove.
so
Uh,
Jake, it's been many years since I've talked to Kent
oh, wonderful.
at Pittman.
Mhm.
So I gather he's still quite active.
Um, yeah, definitely. I think I said enough wrong things about ANSI Common Lisp that he eventually had to come on my podcast to start correcting them himself.
Oh,
He's a very active social commentator and things as well.
oh, really? It's nice to hear. Uh,
I'm
he
going to
was
join you after 5 minutes or so.
Good, good.
he was quite a good student. So I was teaching this computer calculus. Students loved it because they could use the system to do their calculus homework.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess
And
he went on to work on Maxima, so maybe you directed him in that direction, right?
yeah, I introduced. Well, it's Lisp based. So basically, I had to teach this. I had to teach them Lisp. So I introduced him to Lisp and to Maxima. These sorts of things that I've been working on myself.
Hmm.
Um, so it was it was an interesting experience at MIT, but I moved on. Uh,
Well, yeah, I guess that was quite a long time ago, wasn't it? Everybody kind
yes.
of moved on in different directions there, and Kent was went through the Lisp companies like well, I guess
Mhm.
he was at Harlequin when he did ANSI Common Lisp, wasn't he? Um,
Uh-huh.
Yesterday on I have a weekly podcast. Sorry for mentioning this at the start of your stream. Kent was kind of remembering how he had written the Mac Lisp manual and how that went on to affect uh, him kind of fighting ANSI for the copyright of Common Lisp in some funny way. So that was
Mhm.
just what I was talking to him about yesterday. But he did remember you and computer calculus.
Yeah, this idea of actually formally specifying computer languages um, didn't really exist at first. I mean, I remember going to Bell Labs once,
Hmm.
way back at the beginning when C was just getting started, and so I asked them rather naively, "What's the specification for the C language?" And they said, "Specification? It's the compiler. The compiler for C language." I said, "Oh, so the implementation is the specification." And
Yeah, well,
they kind of
yeah.
looked at each other and said, maybe we should have a separate specification.
Hmm.
Uh, anyway, so
Well, I'll have to remember to talk to you. I meant to have John Massey. I meant to interview John Massey from Bell Labs at some point, who like published some stuff with Brian Kernahan, right? Another day I'll talk to you about this.
That's another day. I wasn't active in the C
Mm-hmm.
community, although I did do some work with Ernest Strustrup on C++.
Mm-hmm.
So almost time to start. No, we have 5 more minutes. Steve, hello.
Hello, hello. Thought I'd get on a little early in case you wanted to start right on the dot.
Hope to.
Great.
So you are a co-host.
Did you get the slide deck I sent?
I did, and
I'm going to keep it light. It's not heavy in words, just images.
hopefully they're all available on the session page. Let's see.
Do you normally have us share screens or do you run the slide deck? Or how does that work?
Oh, you should do it yourself.
Okay.
You should have control over it. See if
Should
your
I
son.
should I disable video because I'm not presenting?
You can. I mean, it's up to you.
Okay. Okay.
I don't
I'm
think
not
we have a bandwidth problem.
Good.
I like showing video before we start so we can see each other, and I usually turn it off while people are presenting to avoid distractions.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Let me see. I have Janet's. Janet just sent me her slides. Uh,
It's nice to actually see the faces of the people whose notes I read on the forum. Given that I don't know many of you, it's actually quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
I need to. I'm going to try to get Janet's up, but it's going to take a moment.
We got to branch out. We got too many balding old men on this call, in which I include myself.
I need a haircut, so I mean, can average out.
All right. Well, if you shave, then you'll fit, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
but you don't look old enough to be a balding old man.
Yeah, at least you're trying to obscure the fact that you're growing grey with a magnificent comb over. We all know who that might be.
Just a moment.
Michael, wow.
Hello.
I haven't seen you in such a long time. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Hi, Michael.
I'll have to catch up on things whatever you say today.
Yeah, I'm getting old, so it's getting a little cranky.
Ah, hey, can you remind me? Because I was just going over, I'm going to say a few things, but what years you spent at NIST?
I was down there 2000, 2005.
Ah, okay, 5 years. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. That fills in a gap for me.
Yeah, I find it hard. Memories before the iPhone came out are kind of, a little more blurry. I don't have
Well,
photographic evidence of them.
it's so not only the iPhone, but the whole, I noticed the email, things like that. I'm trying to dig back through from communications of things. And, you know, these days we can hang on to most everything, but in those days that wasn't so easy. So,
Hmm.
whether we want to or not.
I think
Mhm.
we could start. Let's see if this is- Does that work?
Yep.
So let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Today is the 25th February 2026. Thank you, Steve Ray, for correcting me on that. Um, Today we're going to be doing a retrospective of 20 years of the Ontology Summit. And I am the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Ontolog Forum and of this summit. And I would like to give a few introductory kind of things, few statistics and stuff about the summit over the years. And we're going to have a panel of very distinguished veterans of the summit who are going to give their uh, views of what has taken place. And I would also like to move to the audience, to our participants, and get some experiences of yours as well. So, of course, we had 20 annual summits, roughly 4 or so, sometimes less tracks in each one. So, about 80 tracks, something like 300 invited speakers, panelists. As you might imagine, many of them also spoke more than once. But so it's quite a large variety of speakers that we've had. And there have been thousands of documents and videos that have been produced, as well as numerous journal publications. And all of these are continuing to be popular. So here are a few features of the summit, some of which are maybe good, some not so good. We have a complete history of all the activities in our wiki, and as well as all these videos that are stored in a repository. So the advantage of this is that it's a really rich source of materials. The disadvantage is that, well, as you might imagine, there's a lot that's incomplete or misleading, since pretty much everything was saved. And while you could edit, generally they were not. And another disadvantage is that they're heavily used by web crawlers and bots. It's hard to get a good handle on this, but I would say more than half of all the bandwidth is taken up by these web crawlers, bots, possibly even all these LLMs. And that disadvantage of that is that it starts to get a little slow to get to our resources. This session is being live streamed on YouTube. It's also being recorded, and all of this is publicly available. This has evolved over time. Originally, we did not have that capability. So the advantage is then that it's not necessary to attend the session. Well, the disadvantage is that it's not necessary to attend the session. So you have fewer participants who actually participate in current sessions compared to past sessions. Maybe it's good, maybe not, but I think the sessions are still very active and lively and popular. Although it sometimes gives the illusion that the summit isn't as popular as it used to be. Sessions now have just one or two speakers, mostly rather than a large panel as they were in the past. The advantage is that one person can give greater depth and greater focus on a topic. Well, the disadvantage is that coverage gets a little bit, well, less coverage. I mean, more speakers, more people involved can have more interaction. And so perhaps it's not so much the case now. But I think the greater depth kind of outweighs that. We have shorter sessions now, generally only an hour, not hour and a half to 2 hours as they were earlier on. And but we have more sessions. In the past, there were more focused objectives. It's kind of a real point that was to be achieved at each summit, although there are exceptions. But for the most part, the objectives are not nearly as focused now. So a little broader than they used to be. And the communique has changed too. Past communiques were quite short, just to the point. And it could be, I guess, originally only a page or so. Today, they're longer and more detailed, published in peer-reviewed journals, and in some cases, even a whole journal issue devoted to the communique and related papers. Another thing, well, of course, yeah, I guess the disadvantage of that is that it's a lot more work to get all of this out. Another thing that some of the longer term veterans might remember is that we used to collect endorsements, and we don't do that anymore. So it's an interesting question. Should we? But do they matter? Did the endorsements that we collected in the past actually make a difference? It'd be interesting to speculate about that. An interesting thing about introducing the YouTube channel is that we now have two communities. And I gather they're pretty much mostly disjoint. The forum has on the order of 1,400 members, mostly in the forum mailing list, but there are a couple of other mailing lists. Members have namesake pages on the wiki, so you can find out about members. Issues are raised and discussed at the forum, often related to the summit, but not necessarily. And the Board of Trustees enforces the policies and organizes the summits and other series. The YouTube channel has more subscribers, 1,785 at the last time I checked, which was this morning. But the members don't seem to have an equivalent to a namesake page. Perhaps I'm wrong about this, but it's hard to see how it has the same sense of community as in the forum. They do have comments, but they're on the videos. So they're directly related to the videos, and there might be some discussion, but you don't see independent discussions. And of course, there's no management. The Board of Trustees doesn't really manage that channel. So anyway, it's interesting to have these new communities that have emerged in the last decade. How popular are all of our summits? If you just look at the total views for all of the videos and documents that we have in the repository, it's something like 50,000. And you can see over time that it has grown. It's actually kind of exponentially increasing. And you can see that little kind of going up exponentially. Maybe that's just because there are more videos. But there's also a curious little bump there. You might wonder what that is. Well, it was in the context summit. There was something like 12,000 views all in one day, and 22,000 views over a 4-day period, which is quite remarkable. But it's hard to say what that was and why that happened. Seems curious that there was, that this particular summit went viral very briefly and then wasn't so viral anymore. But which summit really was most popular and the one that was kind of consistently had the largest number of views over time? So you might say, which one was that? Was it the one on AI? Well, no. Oh, but yeah, this is 12,000 views on the 13th of July. And then 22,000 views that week. Anyway, it was a knowledge graph in 2020. That summit. Notice how it just consistently goes up and still going up. So hard to know what is going to be popular and what won't be. Other summits have been almost as popular, and I'm not saying this is dramatically more popular. It's just that it's more consistently popular and continues to be popular. So now I'd like to turn it over to our panelists, but let me first go over to another view, if I can. No, this is a different view. Let me get rid of that. So who are our panelists? Well, the best way to find out who they are is to go to their namesake pages. So first we have Janet Singer, and she has been an independent researcher in foundational issues in system science and systems engineering for 4 decades, who had an academic career, has been on the International Council on Systems Engineering, INCOSE, and co-lead of the Scientific Foundations Project of INCOSE. And Michael Gruninger, professor at the Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering at the University of Toronto. And he has been a long time participant and contributor to the Ontology Forum and the and to our summits. And he has in particular developed this, been involved in the common logic standard, and he's also developed the Calori ontology repository. But Michael could certainly tell us more about what he's been up to and his opinions in a moment. And finally, Steve Ray. Steve was the chair of some of the earliest summits and has been very involved in a number of important areas in interoperability and standards in disaster management, smart electrical grid, and so on. Been very busy and doing a lot of things. So welcome to all of you. We certainly have a very distinguished panel today, and we hope we can get some really interesting discussions. So begin with Janet.
Can you run the slides? I couldn't get that going on my iPod.
You want me to run the slides?
Yes,
Okay.
please. The second set. Oh.
I will. Give me a moment while it comes up.
I'd like to say hi to Julian Vincent, I see in the audience, who is popularly known as the father of biomimicry. So, and we spoke a number of years ago about ontologies in biomimicry and his ambitious effort. And so great to have him here. Really timely topic.
Okay, they have just come up. There you are.
Okay, can you go into presenter? Full screen or presenter mode, or it's a PDF, so I guess full screen.
Should be able to go to full screen mode. I'm going to have to check on this.
Okay, I'll start talking while you do that. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Keep talking.
So this is my digestion of the what I've observed sort of from the periphery, even though I've been active in the forum for a number of years. And I've been thinking about these ideas since I, by coincidence, encountered Doug Lennett and R.B. Guha and Tom Gruber and John McCarthy, all in '90 at the same time when I was working on similar topic. And I've been thinking about ontologies in AI and the challenges, because I came from a liberal arts background. So I knew about that ontologies had not really been a answer to resolving Tower of Babel issues throughout history. And so I was unsure how that would work. I've since, partly because of the way there's been a turn toward a biological focus accelerating and spreading, I think, with artificial intelligence and artificial life coming together. I now am enthusiastic about the use of ontologies if it can be slightly reframed in terms that shift from the strictly human AI assumptions of the original project to more of the collective intelligence cross, multi-agent view that is relevant now. So I think so here, this is my perspective. I'm very optimistic. It's taking a while, but I think ontology can play a core role in modeling the Umwelts, as they say in biosemiotics, that agents, biological species live in their own worlds. The tick only sees what the tick responds to, the bat sees what the bat responds to, and each of us has a model world that we live in. It's a subjective model world. There's good grounding for that in the post-Kantian philosophy that has not been capitalized on to date, even though it has influenced. I know it influenced the people that Barry draws on. He wrote a book on the history of speech act theory, going back to early the idea of use of language to communicate and make commitments in social action. Husserl, phenomenology, John Soa with Peirce, and his views of semiotics all build on this. Are you in slideshow mode? I don't see the. It actually doesn't show the full slide.
It says he's at 169% enlargement, so he just needs to put it down to 100 or so.
Right.
I can't seem to get it any larger.
Well, the enlargement is
It's in slideshow mode.
Upper right-hand side, there's a maximize icon.
Expand up on the very far right. Yeah.
Where is that?
On top corner right. Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
That's it.
Okay.
There, got it.
Okay. So now, yeah, next slide. You can go to the next slide. I think you have it in continuous, but that's okay. We will manage.
It's not responding now. It was before.
Right mouse button or page down.
I think I have to go to page down. There it is.
Okay.
Page down, page down. Okay, which one do you want?
This slide, but can you center it?
Yeah, I see how to do it now.
Oh, very good. Okay. So everybody knows that the 2006-2007 effort was hoping for some kind of agreement on an upper ontology. The 20 years of summit challenges and partial results that Ken has talked about, the sustained community and awareness of ontologies is maybe the most important thing that has come out of the 20 years of effort, even though there's still no shared understanding of what an ontology is, how they're related to theories, semantics, intelligence, knowledge, agency, interoperability issues. And this good quote that Gary brought out last time: we like to think of AI as a challenge to human intelligence, but what if the real problem isn't how smart AI is becoming, but how little we understand by what we mean by knowledge? And so part of the question is why, 70 years after the start of AI and decades after the start of work in ontologies, there's still so little agreement on these basic background issues, when AI was supposed to be a method for us to come to understand knowledge and intelligence. Okay, next slide. So how we got here, I think you can say that McCarthy in the 50s, by choosing AI as the framing rather than, I think, Simon and Newell wanted symbol processing as the label for their seminal conference, and or complex symbol processing, and there was an idea of calling it cybernetics. And McCarthy didn't want to do that because he didn't get along with, what's his name? The founder of cybernetics, who had written the book on communication and control in agents and machines. So even though if the whole field had been focused on communication and control in agents and machines for 70 years, I think we would have made a lot more intelligent effort to concretize these questions, because AI was to some extent defined in midair without any grounding. Now, this is from '69. We have McCarthy's influence on the relationship to AI. So an entity is intelligent if it has an adequate model of the world. At the bottom, he says, fortunately, undertaking to embody the philosophy in a computer program involves making enough philosophical presuppositions to exclude most philosophy as irrelevant. So, so there wasn't much effort to actually understand what ontologies were as of late 19th century, what had happened in metaphysics, where dogmatic metaphysics had been deprecated. There really is no such thing as an area of philosophy that studies being qua being. That's a framing from Aristotle, so it's highly out of date. The analytic philosophers interposed their own view that if we just formalize things well enough, then that will sort of discipline our thinking, and we won't have to think more deeply about what we're doing. Next. Okay, so this is the famous passage from Tom Gruber in '93, that was picked up by a lot of people, his definition of an ontology as an explicit specification of a conceptualization. Now, the term is borrowed from philosophy, or an ontology is a systematic account of existence. That's not really true, but it's an abstract, simplified view of the world. Now, this is an interesting point here. For knowledge-based systems, what exists is what can be represented. So that is true, and that is interesting, that what exists for a machine or a knowledge-based system is what can be represented. What exists for an animal or what exists for a human being is not what can be represented. This is a significant difference. And so we have a fundamental incoherence here where we need to take seriously that these are different. Next.
So, Janet, you have about 2 more minutes to finish.
Okay.
2 more minutes.
So McCarthy actually turned away from the simple assumptions of AI. In '89, he got interested in speech act theory and applying it to computers. And this is something that Barry has written a book on, the history of speech act theory. So this is very relevant to a more profound understanding of what communication and control is in humans, animals, and machines. Okay, next. Now, currently what is going on is, as I said, the world has bypassed the simplistic ideas of AI, going to collective multi-agent intelligence. And this is where ontology can really come to play a key role, I think. Here on the right, this is the Mike Levin, who does great work on exploring intelligence without dogmatic assumptions of where it's coming from. He wants to expand and cover these evolved life forms, engineered machines, AIs. And he says we're all collective intelligences, not just ants and bee colonies, but we're all made of parts that have become aligned to work together to give rise to systems. And the collective intelligence is different from that of the parts. No individual cells knows what a finger is or how many fingers you're supposed to have, but the collective absolutely does. Next.
One more minute.
Okay, so reframing ontologies as model worlds for these intelligent agents, whatever species they are, solves problems of going from the old view to the new view. Next. This is based on Kant's critical turn in the metaphysics of late 18th century, where neither empiricists nor rationalists had actually thought through what the basis was for judging causality, substance, quality, quantity, modality, interdependence, and these are topics that we struggle with. These are the metaphysical topics that do not have good definitions. So we need a better philosophical grounding of what these are. Next. So both Peirce and von Uexküll specifically built on Kant, as did Husserl and Reinach and Robert Rosen, and they all agree on this general view of intelligence and how complex it is. It's fundamentally complex. So if we want to model intelligence, and we want to model intelligent agents, and we want to model their interoperation, we need to shift to this more complex view. Next. Next. Oh, so there are challenges that you would see in the slides that Ken has put out. Next. So the motivating question of neural networks for the cybernetics pioneer Warren McCulloch was, what is a number that a man may know it, and the man that he may know a number? And next. So the proposed motivating question of ontology should be, what is an ontology that it may guide an agent, and an agent that it may reflect an ontology? Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Janet. Next, we have Michael.
Okay. Okay, well, thanks for the invitation today. It's great to see a lot of old faces for a retrospective kind of event. And I'm very excited about this because I really feel ontology summits have been very influential in shaping the broader applied ontology community over the past 20 years. It's been an invaluable resource, as Ken mentioned, everything being online and recorded. I often will point to various summits in my course, the ontology courses that I teach. So it's a tremendous resource. And the other good thing is that they've driven a lot of research directions, but in some cases have fallen short of their maybe initial promise. And so what I want to talk about today briefly is kind of go over some of my favorite ontology summits. They're going to be some of the earlier ones because I was the most active in those. But I also kind of feel like they really set a lot of agendas. And so I want to kind of discuss both the impact that they had, like both when they occurred, but also through the following years. So I'm going to be again focusing on some of the earlier ones, beginning with the original Upper Ontology Summit in 2006, the Ontology Taxonomy of Folksonomy one in 2007, Open Ontology Repository in 2008, Ontology-based standards, making the case for ontology, and then finish up with the ontology evaluation across the life cycle. This is not to ignore the more recent summits, but I kind of, in the interest of time, I wanted to kind of focus on these particular ones. The original Upper Ontology Summit was a really great idea. It was very ambitious to bring together the stakeholders of all the different upper ontologies that were being designed, and at the time, I think that's where the word summit came from, to kind of bring all of these groups together. And although initially there were some nice discussions, it took a while to me, in my perspective, it took a while for this initiative to actually, or to this summit to bear fruit in some initiatives. I think eventually it did. There is the Faust workshop that occurs every year as part of the joint ontology workshops. Faust stands for the foundational stance. And so this is a workshop kind of dedicated to upper ontologies and issues related to them. So this is a really high kind of impact event within the applied ontology academic and industrial community. And most recently, it led to a special issue of the Applied Ontology Journal where there were a set of story problems, like benchmark problems, that you could be used to evaluate and compare the various upper ontologies. And so I think that was a really great kind of deliverable from that. And then see that actually led into the Faust series. And I think maybe the more recent and high impact outcome or fruit that was from the original Ontology Summit is ISO 21838, the top level ontologies project. This is not a standard upper ontology. It is standard for upper ontologies. And so it effectively has become a kind of a home for the various upper ontologies that appeared in that original Upper Ontology Summit and also in the Faust special issue of Applied Ontology. So there's a multi-part standard. Part one is defining what are the characteristics of an upper ontology. What actually makes an ontology an upper ontology? And then the subsequent parts are focusing in on demonstrating that a particular upper ontology actually satisfies those requirements. And it's both requirements in terms of content, but also requirements in terms of evaluation, consistency, modularization, etc. So part two is BFO, part three is Dolce, part four is called Tupper, which is a kind of one that we extracted out of ISO standards. Part five, which is under the draft international standard ballot right now, is UFO. And the efforts out of the UK, Boro, that came out of Matthew West's work and Chris Partridge's work, is also being considered. So that was a really good outcome for that. I'm labeling this slide and some other later slides as regrets. I'm feeling a little more optimistic today. I mean, I think we could look at this as still open opportunities. I mean, the regrets insofar as they didn't actually happen, but I think it's a positive spin is that these are still opportunities that we can often address. So I think on the one hand, I think upper ontologies, independent of the work I just mentioned in terms of Faust, etc., upper ontologies are still silos. There's a lot of work. There's not enough work, I think, in understanding the relationships. And people sort of just say, oh, yeah, I'm using this one, I'm using that one, or you're using that one. And we kind of say, okay, we'll agree to disagree. But there really is not a lot. I still believe there's not really enough interaction between them. The modularity of upper ontologies is also ignored. And a lot of people believe an upper ontology is monolithic, and so that requires a complete 100% buy-in. I'm of the opinion that that's not the case, that we can have modular upper ontologies where people can actually do more significant sharing and use multiple upper ontologies. I think the question of the evaluation of upper ontologies is still lacking. I mean, some have been, say, verified with respect to their underlying models of their axiomizations. And one other side effect of the ISO 21838 project was to actually force some projects to commit to a particular set of axioms. So now these are artifacts that can be analyzed, checked for their consistency, etc. But also the validation. Right? So the kind of the, how well do upper ontologies actually represent the phenomena that they claim to represent? Again, very little work that's being done on that. Another aspect was within part one of 21838 was a kind of an attempt at kind of what are the characteristics of upper ontology. This is actually one true regret. I think this really was, I don't know, kind of rushed through in some ways. I think the community could have been much more involved in this. And I'm not sure if there is yet a community consensus on what those characteristics are. Hopefully, maybe at some point, this could become part of a revision of the 21838 standard when it comes up for renewal, I guess, every 5 years or so. The following year was the Ontology Summit for Ontology, Taxonomy, Folksonomies. I think what came out of this was the idea of, what is an ontology? And like on the one hand, we took a very ecumenical view at the time that we wanted to have a framework that could encompass a wide variety of artifacts under the umbrella of an ontology. But I still worry that we ended up with a definition that ended up being so general that it was watered down and kind of rendered a bit useless. I mean, and as Janet noticed, I mean, to this day, people still ask, what is an ontology? And that is not a good situation to be in. And I'm not sure like what exactly the response would be. I mean, to be more dogmatic and to exclude people and say, no, you are not really doing ontology. That's not very productive. But at the same time, to have a definition that's so broad that anything could qualify also is not productive. So it's kind of odd, but to this day, I think this is still an open issue for discussion. The year after that, so 2008, was the Ontology Repository Summit. And this had some very concrete outcomes. One was the creation of OOR.net. And there was an initial set of repositories that came out from various places that kind of are that were used, initiated. One of these, as Ken mentioned, is Colore, the Common Logic Ontology Repository, which is still actively used, at least by the Toronto group, I suppose. But it has over 2,000, 3,000 different ontologies, many of which are mathematical ontologies, but those are actually used as ontology patterns, which support ontology verification and ontology learning. So there's that kind of aspect of that. And I also think that one of the really great outcomes of that summit was it was like the first step towards the FAIR principles for ontologies. So FAIR meaning findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. I think the idea of having these repositories that they could be findable and accessible was, I don't know, in some ways, that was the seed for that in terms of ontologies. And in the past, 4 or 5 years, there have been events at ontology conferences dedicated to FAIR principles for ontologies. And I think those all were motivated by this initial ontology summit for repositories. I think on the downside, there has been a bit of a lack of adoption. I think there was some momentum early on, and it sort of fizzled out to some extent. And partly this, another outcome was after Peter Yim's passing, he owned all of those domain names, and those are now dead, and they have been poached by domain name predators. And so this is something I need some help with this, particularly with Colore, because those links are no longer dereferenceable. So this is a particular challenge and obstacle, I think, to some adoption. I think another question could be whether something like the International Association of Ontologist Applications could take it as one of its missions to host a comprehensive ontology repository, or at least a clearinghouse ontology lake for different ontology repositories. So people can say, well, I'm looking for an ontology for X. Where do I go? How do I find it? Kind of idea. Again, it's still a bit of an unfulfilled promise. The year after that was ontologies and standards. And I think on the one hand, again, this is where people started thinking about something like ISO 21838 to kind of look at, how can we start dealing with ontologies in the face of standards. I think on the plus side, ontologies are really gaining an increasing profile within organizations like ISO. And there are numerous efforts, not only within ISO, but also within OMG. So I think, again, this particular summit that year started the ball rolling on bringing ontologies to the awareness of standards organizations and bringing standards organizations to the awareness of the ontology community. Although it's kind of been a mixed blessing. Even though there are a lot of groups within ISO that I know of, I'm referring to ISO, that's my experience. I still work within ISO with the metadata, the data interchange group, SC32, and particularly WG2, the metadata group. So the problem is that the adoption of ontologies within organizations like ISO is still very chaotic, very ad hoc. There are multiple, maybe even dozens of definitions for ontology that different groups use. There's very little coordination, very little reuse. It's the city of 100 silos, to paraphrase Mark Twain. And so again, this is a true regret. I think this is another kind of missed opportunity. I'm not really sure how to help this. We need to maybe invest some sweat and tears here to really bring together a lot of these disparate groups within standards organizations to try to come up with some sort of neo-coherence. The year after that was, or maybe not quite a year after that, I think it might have been in 2011, making the case for ontology. And I think some of the initiatives that came out of this, I think were very interesting. I think first it highlighted the impact of ontologies. And I think it provided a lot of really good test cases in work that I've done with various companies. I often point to this to have very concrete examples so they can see like exactly what the impact could possibly be. I think another useful deliverable out of that summit was the ontology application framework, which provides a little bit of structure on how the different ways in which ontologies can be applied. And this again serves as a very, very useful guide when you are initiating specific projects with industry in terms of like how, given a set of ontologies, how you want to apply them. So I think that was two really good outcomes there. But I still think we need to have more case studies that validate ontologies. I think this would be a challenge, I think, partly for the academic community to see more publications in journals like Applied Ontology and venues like FOMI, the Formal Ontology Meets Industry workshop that happens with the ontology conferences, to have really more case studies, to really have some rigor in terms of this. Because there really is no systematic or coordinated effort to kind of collect these case studies. And then one bullet I didn't put down here that Janet raised and reminded me was, and it's kind of related to the idea that we don't really have a good definition of ontology that's widely accepted, but the ontology is a bit of a chameleon when it comes to industry. For a while, you could say, oh yeah, it's related knowledge graphs, and they'd say, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. Now you can say, well, it's related to the world models that you might want to use in an LLM. Oh, I can see what you're doing. So that might be another kind of angle here is, kind of recasting ontology work in whatever the buzzword of the month is. And then to kind of at the end here, the last couple of slides, the Ontology Lifecycle Summit. I really look at this as being kind of the really first step towards ontology engineering as a discipline. I mean, it kind of always been sort of a collection of methodologies and tools and efforts like that. But I think this ontology really encapsulated this in lack of a better word, encapsulated it within an actual life cycle diagram. And this has also been tremendously useful to, again, think of it as an engineering discipline. And in particular, the recognition that ontologies are artifacts designed with respect to semantic requirements. To me, there's been this denigration of ontologies, maybe even from other people within the knowledge representation community, the AI community, more broadly speaking. The ontologies are like data models. They're the throwaway, they're like programs. Why would you want to study ontology? You just write them, you use them, you apply them, you're done. They're almost dispensable. You use them once, throw them away, use something else again. And they're really never designed with respect to requirements. And again, I think this is something we need to look at. And even though I say that was a good outcome of this summit, I still think there are, to this day, I'm not going to name names, but there still are ontologies that continue to be designed without explicit specification of their requirements. They're kind of driven more by ideology, philosophical presuppositions, philosophical camps, rather than underlying, again, semantic requirements. Like, what am I supposed to be doing with this ontology? And in a way, that ontology application framework, that was the outcome of the earlier making the case for ontologies, I think that serves as a way of kind of casting what those requirements would be, like the use cases, et cetera. That really needs to be kind of revisited and used, because designing ontologies by ideology is not really going to get anywhere in the long run. So that's it, my end of my soapbox. But yeah, just to kind of say, like, each Ontology Summit is a very unique opportunity to explore such a wide range of problems, the frontiers of applied ontology. It's been such an invaluable phenomenon. I'll call it that. I'm not sure what category that is in my upper ontology, but I think I'm really looking forward to future summits and to where the future of ontologies will go. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That was very, very interesting, very provocative. I think we really need to pay a lot of attention to your regrets, and hopefully future summits will start addressing some of these.
Yeah, I became more optimistic when I saw everybody's faces again. So yeah, I was more pessimistic calling them regrets.
So, Steve.
Okay, can you see my slide? It should be in screen show mode now. So I'm taking a kind of a different approach to this. It's more of an anecdotal story here of how where I was coming from and how I came to find myself as one of the founders of the Ontology Summit series. So this will be familiar to some of you who've been around for a long time, and maybe not for others. Um, I was working in interoperability standards. I spent many decades working in interoperability standards, and one of them you can see here was a language for process specification. Back in the early 90s, a colleague and I built this model. Didn't even know about the word ontology at the time, just built sort of a semantic or data model even for that, and then entered a sort of a dark period, lower left here, this blank part, where I was moving into trying to collaborate in the ISO world that Michael mentions on coming up with a standard for process specification, for process planning in the manufacturing sector. Got very frustrated and disillusioned during that process, I'll say, of trying to build such a thing in a large committee. Turned out to be too many cooks spoiling the broth kind of situation. So, toward the latter part of the 90s, I started a project where we wanted to start over and kept picking up on Michael's theme of requirements. We did a year-long requirement study of what needs to be in a language to characterize manufacturing processes, to describe them. We did that, and we actually collected requirements. We collected candidate things that purported to meet those requirements, and did a study of that. And then we held this roundtable. This is now in 97, where we brought together a whole bunch of folks who had been doing some work in specifying process, manufacturing process. And it was at that roundtable where we thought we were going to like maybe glue together various things people had done. But this was the year of my first epiphany, if you like. And in fact, Michael was there as well, which was that, gee, I think it was Michael also ascribed this to you, whether it was actually you, I think it was, who said, you all working on all these different ways of coming up with a good model for process. But if you're really serious about trying to be rigorous and careful about that, there's this thing called, first order logic, which has been around for a couple of millennia. And really, you should think about getting serious about formal logic as a substrate, if you like, for doing this. Stop thinking of syntax, stop thinking of data structures, go with that. And indeed, um, um, I became a zealot for that, and an evangelist maybe would be a better word. And indeed, and that's why I was asking you, Michael, when you were at NIST, we got Michael to come to NIST. He spent 5 years there and came up with ultimately this first order logic based specification called the process specification language, which eventually became an ISO standard that Michael had mentioned in passing. So that was great. I thought we were really moving toward solving the interoperability problem, or at least improving it. But I felt, actually, I didn't know this was out. Okay, I'll do that. Improving standards, interoperability standards in general. We used to have, in fact, embarrassingly, a lot of things are still just natural language text saying, and this is actually an ISO standard, which I haven't checked, but I presume has gotten better since then. Just good old language paragraph so you can sort of internalize what that really means to you. Um, Following that, and this is the step standard of those of you who know it, there was a language called Express, which was a data modeling language, which did better than certainly natural language. But in the end, and here's Michael's PSL standard, uh, doing more than just the data structure, but actually, making semantic assertions. And I bow toward those of you who are more schooled in formal logic and axioms. I'm just a user. So this was the direction I was thinking, not just manufacturing process standards, but all information standards should be heading in this direction. Um, and I've been evangelizing that ever since, in fact. Now, go just a few years later, and I found myself bumping into this group called the Ontolog Forum, and realized that here's a whole community of people who have been talking about this kind of formalization for a long time. Good old Wayback Machine allowed me to pull up some of these links. And Michael, you might check on that. But anyway, one thing led to another, and this was back in around 2004. And next thing I know, it was Peter Yim, Leo Oberst, and I started talking about, gee, maybe we could have a summit series on uh, talking about ontologies. And I was looking at it from the international standards perspective of interoperability and thinking, wow, this could be a really good way to proselytize, essentially get the word out there of how ontologies could be very useful for standards, for information standards. So we started that, and then 2 years later was when the first Ontology Summit was created, and that's, as has been mentioned, that was when we brought together some of the chief owners, if you like, or authors of some of the upper ontologies. But again, my interest has always been not so much on the ontologies themselves, but how they can play a role in interoperability. And that's honestly where I've been ever since. I'm still working in this area, not focusing on the ontology community. Sorry, guys, but on using ontologies. I've been working more recently in standards bodies like ASHRAE, that's the American Society of Heating and Refrigeration Engineers, for a machine readable standard for HVAC system, basically all the infrastructure in a building. And some of you may know I've also jumped into uh, hosting or organizing and creating an ontology for units of measure called QUDT, quantities, units, dimensions, and types, which I'm currently in the process of moving that into a home where it will have a route toward an international standard in its own right. That's a subject for another time, but I just wanted to give you my perspective as one of the people that came together to say, let's have a summit series. My perspective was again on interoperability standards, and that might inform some of you as to how that came about. With that, I will hand it over back to Ken.
That was it was great. It was good to hear what happened in those early summits. I showed up at the second summit. That was when I got involved in it. Although I've been working on data semantics long before then. So now it's time to ask for other veterans to chime in on what their experiences were. Feel free to unmute yourself and join the conversation here.
It is if I
Bobby?
may, Ken, thank you. If I may take this occasion to thank all the people in this summit attending personally, as well as to the stalwarts who got us started. I joined it in 2008 with open ontology repositories, and since then I've been continuing. And of course, we miss speakers and organizers like Peter Yim and Doug Leonard, who spoke to us several times. And we, of course, would have liked to see people like Leo here today, but maybe he's busy with other things. And it is really a great path. Where are we going? It's a lot of pull into AI now in future. Understanding and knowledge are closely intertwined, and the means we have, at least as humans, are listening, seeing, contemplating, and reflecting further, and then probably we achieve knowledge. So I'm at an overview level today, thanking you, especially all three panelists, Janet, Michael, and Steve. I have worked with you on several summits, and I apologize to Michael Gruninger because in several of these communiques, he had the expression, "Oh my God, it's Ravi again asking the question." So here is Ravi wishing this tremendous 20-year summit a great recap and our future paths being brighter within, of course, influenced by the umbrella of AI these days. But we hope that we keep our balance and describe ontology as a standalone as well as integrated part of knowledge systems. Thank you.
Ravi, Gary, would you like to comment?
Gary didn't hear us, I guess.
Gary, can you hear us?
Yes, I wasn't sure if he was calling to me.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a very nice retrospective. I'm glad that, for example, Michael covered some of the earlier summits with a very much of an ontology focus. People who attended last week might have noticed that I sort of covered the latter half of that when AI was more prominent. I do go back to the first summit, though I was a bit late for it, but I was part of the people agreeing with that. And again, it's as a cognitive psychologist, it's been interesting to follow the path of the pursuit of knowledge and meaning. And some of the speakers that I've organized with Ram for the next sessions will actually have a bit more to say about those future directions. I, like many other people, believe that the whole field has moved more in a more cognitive direction, and that I think that'll be an interesting future direction.
Hello. Can I have a short burst?
Sure, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Right. Okay. Oh, Robert Rivetto. Yes, I've talked to him. My reason for using an ontology is not an interest in ontology as such. I fully reveal myself as some sort of a barbarian in this way, but I wanted a functional system which would allow me to categorize and to classify the ways in which animals and plants solve what might be regarded as technical problems, basically for survival. And I now find evolution as well. Hooray. But abstract these techniques that they use in such a way that I could transfer the abstraction through to, by analogy, through to a mechanical version of the same categorization, but using different endpoints for the various categories that I was erecting. Now, the only system I know of which can do this is a system called TRIZ. Teoria Rejenia Izobritatelskid Zadach. And I had a couple of Russians working with my team when I was doing research in this in the University of Bath as a biologist in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, which was a bit of a shock in a way and not very satisfactory. But I managed to understand what the problem was, but hardly got around to solving it. I tried a database, and that, of course, was a load of rubbish. Everybody else was trying databases, and they were producing equal or even more amounts of rubbish. I gave that up after 2 weeks. I don't know how anybody can keep hanging on in there and not being able to see that what they're doing is not particularly, what shall we say, insightful. And then I heard about this thing called an ontology, and I thought, oh, that looks a bit more powerful than a database. And so I started putting my system into an ontology. I don't know that I've managed very well. I haven't made any use of all the power that an ontology can give me, mainly because I haven't understood really what it's all about. Janet Stringer tried to enlighten me during a meeting in Ohio quite a few years ago. I'm afraid I wasn't ready for such erudition at the time. Maybe knowing that this group exists and has, from what I gather of the recent comments just a few moments ago being made, there seems to be a drive towards not doing the sort of, shall we say, almost metaphysical understanding of what an ontology is supposed to do and how it's structured and who the greats were back in ancient Greece, but to try to work out how I could make use of all these tricks and teases to make my ontology into a truly world-beating system. I've published a few papers on this, and for those who actually could see the light, most people are terribly short-sighted, I find, then it did really seem to open a few doorways. I'm still trying to interest people, but it's only the brightest who seem to want to come along or able to see what I'm actually trying to do. I'm hoping that having discovered this little outfit, well, I don't know, it's a big outfit actually, this group of people, that I may be able to challenge you and say, right, well, I've got this system. It's based on a well-known engineering problem-solving system, this TRIZ thing, which is based on a dialectic approach. So I'm using trade-offs, some of which I have to define for myself because the people doing the research haven't defined them properly. But using trade-offs, which as I read through them and as the ideas of trade-offs develop alongside this within biology, are showing themselves to be a basis almost of biology for which there is no general solution. And I wonder if I may be actually reaching out beyond myself, trying to do this, and I've sort of grabbed the tail of something which is probably quite important because it's simple. Well, it's relatively simple. You have to have a fair amount of understanding and knowledge of biology, but the underlying concept is simple, and that must be good. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's see, I think it was Robert who had his hand up next. Robert?
Thank you, Ken. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. And thank you all for the excellent presentations. Janet, Michael, Steve, it was great. And it's also great to go back to the history of various projects. And thank you, Ken, for opening the floor to people to share their experiences as well. So I'll just touch on one. In the ISO standard, just for context, originally, and I was part of the current ISO standard before it was what it was, when it was particularly focused around a single upper ontology in Buffalo, and so it was notoriously biased for that, and so that needs to be taken into consideration because through that process, in which me as a member of a national body provided input on the claims of global reach, that it was biased as evidenced by the members of the group having affiliations or having vested interests in that particular upper ontology. Those comments, I believe, were part of the driving force to try to make it truly international. However, I think the student and the practitioner in ontology should still scrutinize it, because if there is sufficient bias for a particular upper ontology in the current requirements in part one, then that should not be acceptable for an international standard. There should be, as I argued back then, it should have international voices, such as Michael's, such as folks in Italy, such as folks in Brazil and other countries. I know some upper ontologies who are not interested in engaging in the community because of these sort of domineering voices and these sort of monopolizing perspectives or monopolizing attempts in the upper ontology world. And there tends to be an adversarial and sort of business-minded outlook among some groups. And so if the international standard itself is truly supposed to be international, then I think the global community of upper ontology interested persons, from the student to those who have upper ontologies, to those who want to create new upper ontologies, should have a voice in critically scrutinizing the current requirements, because not all will accept them. And there are some examples of existing upper ontologies who do not agree. This is from past conversations with the current requirements, which originally, as I mentioned, were biased for that Buffalo ontology. Now, I think, again, have the global community of people interested in upper ontologies criticize or positively, constructively, critically scrutinize it and see if it truly is a global applicable standard for that. And secondly, I think it's very important to make the student, the expert, and others aware that you can create your own upper ontology. And if you want to, but you need to, I make the distinction between, are you trying to do philosophy or are you trying to do computer science? In either case, be explicit and transparent about what you're trying to do. Are you trying to make claims about the metaphysics of the world? If so, then perhaps it might muddle the waters if you are trying to apply that in a computer science context. And the reason is the more abstract you get, the more open to interpretation and the more vague things get. And so making claims on domains at such a level that are more specific raises various issues, both ethical and practical. So these are just some suggestions and some input. Thanks again to all the speakers. Again, wonderful, and happy belated New Year.
So I had a quick response to some of the things that Janet mentioned and Julian sort of followed up on, which it relates to the symbol grounding process, which is now being explored a little bit more through the experience, if you want to call it that, of robotics. So I think that's we're getting to an interesting point where the question has become, what type of world model / ontology can a robot intelligence, if you want to call it intelligence, build based on its experience within the environment it is in? And this work actually goes back a ways. Around 2005 or so, I was part of a 10-year conference at NIST on performance metrics for intelligent systems. And even at that time, there were people who were writing about bringing up robot, which is the idea of using various machine learning to ground concepts that a robot might have. And there's more interesting work going on that now, and something to look forward to.
Could I just add a rider there? And that is that one of the first people who was really interested in what I was doing was an engineer called Rupert Saw, who's done some very nice work on the way termites' nests are built. And termite, of course, is only a few millimeters long, and yet it builds a nest which is up to 2 meters high and will last for 100 years or more. So obviously a termite cannot have a concept at all of what it's actually doing in terms of our world. And so you need to understand the termite there as something which is making decisions based on a small amount of evidence in a world which is totally different from the one that we have. Now, if as architects want to do is to transfer the information and the ways of understanding what they're doing into a larger model, then the architects would really love to know how you can do this and whether it's possible to build to go into agents and get lots of little agents who can make instantaneous, more or less, decisions as to what they're doing under some sort of generalized bow plan. And produce a building which is as efficient in so many ways, such as temperature control but more important, ventilation, as the termites muse, without really having to do anything than press one or two buttons. This is still a pipe dream. I haven't really got to work on grips on it yet. And Rupert is very interested in 3D printing and stuff like that, which is a very reasonable way of sort of producing a robot equivalent. But that rather chimes in with the idea that an ontology would be one way to go with controlling robots. Unfortunately, I find that as far as natural history and engine biology is concerned, AI is absolutely useless. It can't go into the detail. It fudges over everything. And it still requires me to decide what the important detail is in order to work out basically the parameters in the real way, parameters which are driving the whole thing along. So it's still a very difficult problem.
Okay, let's. Janet has her hand up. Janet.
So yeah, that's great, Julian. And what you said there and what Gary said it's good to see that we should expand our thinking about. We've become somewhat entrenched in ontologies where they have had success, and there's a certain amount of middle out work that is just how do we support these and build them for interoperation, that kind of thing. And then there's rethinking what is going on with ontologies. Why are we calling them ontologies? What is an agent that could make use of your world model that could help produce the designs that you need? I think in answer to Rob, I think it's actually, if we went back to the foundations, we could find that Barry and John Soa actually agree on a lot, as we saw in the 2018 face-to-face meeting, where Barry Smith and John Soa had a confrontation. I forget what it was called. I came across the YouTube recently, where they found that they did agree on a number of things, even though they disagreed strongly on others. But people have gotten entrenched in certain formulations, presentations, products, whereas the deeper ideas, there's actually a lot of commonality if there were time and space to talk those through. And that could help provide more health for the whole community and solidify everybody moving forward.
So we have a few questions in the chat.
Yes.
Todd, was that you asked about something? Is that you asked about identifier?
Todd?
Michael, hi, everybody. That's just a general question I had for everybody on the call. It's an issue that has come up in the IOF. It seems to be very not easy to resolve. But Jake Was asking if he could ask a question, Kenneth.
Oh, yeah. Well, as for this question of identifier, one has to wonder why. I mean, why do you need an identifier? And you can't really say what it should be until you know the purpose. In fact, you should consider all the W questions, right?
Well, it is in a context. It's
So
in
you
the
need a
context of the
context.
Industrial Ontology Foundry.
Yeah, so it's.
Well, perhaps.
You need a context before you could answer a question like that. So I don't think it's appropriate to take a poll because everybody's going to have their own context.
Well, that's fine. I would just wanted to see if there was some commonality among people's interpretations. I understand
Right.
that everyone has their own context and perhaps biases. That's okay. When you go to use, I should say, when you go to publish an ontology and you have people that you have no idea who may use it, use your ontology, you have to take that into account in designing it to some extent, unless you're building an explicit application ontology. The IOF is building, if you like, mid-level ontologies, so we expect them to be used in ways that we may not imagine. We have
Oh, it
use
is
cases, of
the
course, but they're limited.
Right. So I guess you could say the same in general about ontologies. I mean, why are you building the ontology? Or what level is it? Right? Is it mid-level,
Yep.
upper level, application level?
Yes, so
On the
you
other
could
hand, it
think
would
of
be
it in
useful
terms
if
of
we
the
actually
collection
came
or
up.
the set of.
It would be nice to come up with a
I'm sorry.
consensus of what an ontology is.
Well, as you pointed out, Kenneth, the understanding or interpretation of the constructs in an ontology based on based on context. So you could think of a foundational ontology, aka upper ontology, as applicable in a large collection, large set of contexts, whereas an application ontology is understood in a small range or small set of contexts,
Yeah, so
right? The
context.
possible
So
worlds,
that's
possible models for interpretation.
right. So you're really starting to come up with a definition of ontology. That's
Again.
exactly what we need, right?
Again.
Would
Well, one of the
Steve, would
important
you agree
aspects
with
of
that?
one of the important aspects of ontologies that Janet touched on was communication, in
Mhm.
that humans are going to be the ones that build ontologies, at least at this point, but we want our machines to be able to interpret them. So we need some consistency in possible interpretations. And as we've seen with some of the earlier LLMs, they have their own wild interpretations of certain notions. And we need to constrain those in many situations.
So just as you emphasize context, Todd and others, we have to also emphasize explanations. So it would help us validate ontology. And second thing is, in every reuse, there are reuse purposes to be reviewed before blind reuse, and extensibility with modifications is another use case of a reuse. That's all I wanted to add.
Okay, that's great. But Jake had a question. Would you unmute yourself and ask?
Oh, I was just beginning to try and type it. I'm afraid that the 2026 retrospectives forum was my first one. Janet made the point that I think has been kind of echoing maybe for years now, that AI and A-life are kind of fueling the current importance of ontology. And she also brought up McCarthy a couple of times. And this put me in mind of de Groot's new book about McCarthy, A Genius of Lisp. In the foreword written by Richard P. Gabriel, he's saying the new thing with new AI and A-life, I guess the kind of LLM-powered ones, they're really seen as being numeric algorithms operating on floats. And I was really hoping to get either Janet or other people's kind of retrospective position on how do you explain this? This is a numeric thing with all these numbers. Oh, this was in Richard P. Gabriel's foreword to A Genius of Lisp, where he says, a long time ago we had symbols and ontologies and these kinds of thinking in the context of Lisp. But now people really construe these as being numeric methods having one. Sorry, I don't know if my question makes sense here, but that's what I wanted to ask about.
Yeah, interesting. I'd say that the numbers are symbols as well. They're just different kind of symbols, different kind of code, different kind of formulations, models, rules that respond to the numbers. So if you put them in a spectrum, it wouldn't be either or. It would be natural language, speech, writing, signs. All of this would be within semiotics. If semiotics, the doing things with signs, was taken seriously as sort of foundational to this effort, then we could see more clearly the contrast between what do you gain and what do you lose when you take one approach to building the machine intelligence versus another. And they're doing that. You see that there are obviously strengths and weaknesses. People recognize that, but the constraining ideas of how communication would occur on the semantic web missed what the language models were capable of. It has lost truth conditional precision, but it has achieved so much in, one could say, rhetoric. The language models are capable of engaging in rhetoric, but they're not very good at handling truth. Anyway, so it's all very interesting as different cases within communication and control using signs.
Very good. Thanks, Janet. See, Gary was next.
Yes, two things. One is that we are going to have, as part of the AI ontology track, Randy Goebel talking about editing foundational models, which gets at the combination of symbolic-oriented spaces with words and vector-oriented spaces for modern Gen AI. So stay tuned for that. I really raised my hand just to make a small insert into the potentially endless conversation about what is an ontology, and say that it is a mistake now to say that humans build ontologies and then they can be processed by machines. We all know now a bit about vibe coding, so that Gen AIs are capable of symbolic processing. That includes ontologies. So you can ask Gen AIs, and this I mentioned before, to do vibe coding for ontologies, not just for huge code sets. And that can be very interesting, if not productive. I've done myself, I mentioned this last time, so just some exploratory work on sort of harmonizing between ontologies, saying, how do you relate these, what's missing, and things and so forth. And they will produce thousands of lines of ideas, and you can have conversations about them. So you can do verification and validation and using the Gen AI itself if you have an agent-oriented approach. So I'll just mention that in passing. Maybe a little bit more of that will be talked about as part of the AI track.
So Robert has his hand up. Thanks, Gary. Looking forward to your track.
Yeah, Ram's not here now, but he has interesting things to say about AI and ontologies, and I'll have a few more things to add next week.
Yeah, and we should make it clear. Everybody should come next week when we start the AI track.
And so do we invite you all for interoperability, where Mike Bennett, and others will speak. I will also. Thank you.
Robert, go ahead.
Yes, hello, thanks. Todd had a couple of questions. One was and as also Ken, the context-aware, context-specific approach. If there's a specific approach, or if there's more than one approach, or your approach, do you have? Is there any material or content that you might be able to share on that? It sounded quite interesting. I'm not sure if I got the full scope, but that's the first question. Is there any shareable content? And then the second question, Todd, is about, so I think you mentioned the industry foundries and whatnot. If is that still based on the same particular top level ontology? If so, then that raises the same sort of concerns, because that presumably would exclude other top level ontologies from using such things, and it would introduce that bias again for that particular way of modeling, that particular worldview, that particular set of terminological or semantic constructs, and so that goes back to the same issues, which also raises the issues of the ethics of ontology development, right? The creation of these various so-called foundries modeled on the bios is all behind it is the Buffalo Group, and so it raises the concern of monopolization and exclusion of competing stakeholders, namely other top level ontologies across the world. So those are just two points and questions. Over. Thank you.
Say, Robert, I'll respond quickly. There was a separate summit on contexts. So I'll point you to that summit. I don't remember which year it was. I don't know if it was 2020 or 2019, but whichever. It's there on our web pages. Regarding the IOF, the Industrial Ontologies Foundry, yes, the members of the organization, we sort of had a runoff to decide which foundational ontology we should base our work on, and BFO was chosen. What can I say? All foundational ontologies, I think, as what has been pointed out, have limitations. In order, though, to get some sort of interoperability, using a foundational ontology, I think, is a good place to start. I think the issue you raised about biases is certainly valid, but the other issue that should be taken into account is how strictly you want to adhere or follow a particular foundational ontology. They all have limitations, and then if you come upon or cross a limitation, how will the organization, the people, who are actually building or have built that foundational ontology, how are they going to respond to the necessary changes? And hopefully they will do it in an engineering fashion or engineered fashion rather than a theological fashion. I think that's all I have to say about that.
That's great points, Todd. And so to clarify further context, I was also part of the IOF in early stages, and I actually was encouraging and also recommending that others in the wider top level ontology world be included from Europe to North America to elsewhere. And if you look at some of the particulars of the interactions and also the stakeholders involved, there was, as you say, a bias for that particular upper ontology, and there was significant resistance to contrary votes, at least when I was there in my experience. That being said,
Robert,
I would like to see.
But Robert, hold on. I know you're familiar with Barry Smith, and you have to admit, over the decade or more that Barry has been just outright selling BFO, he's become very excellent at that job. So because of that, he has been able to motivate people to use BFO. But I think we should move on from that. Steve.
So the second point was
Steve.
Go ahead, Robert. You finish up your thought, and I'll.
Thanks, Steve. Yes. So I'll just briefly comment on Todd's, and then the second off-topic point or tangent point. So I understand what you said. However, it does raise issues around, as I mentioned, the ethics of ontology development and how it is pushed, and whether it is actually there is sort of a fairness in regards to the inclusion and the consideration of other top-level ontologies, and whether there are actually structural biases or structural unfairnesses that go into the selection and also the spreading of particular ontology. So the issue of monopolization it comes into play. So those are important issues that need to be taken into consideration, and the student should be aware of that. They shouldn't feel forced, or just the user shouldn't feel forced to jump on the bandwagon if they don't agree. Then the other point is, you don't actually need to use an upper ontology for many things. So you can also create your own. So there shouldn't be any political or underhanded or otherwise pressures to, just because someone is good at marketing or someone has a lot of money to spread their product. And if it is an academic setting, it raises the question of why such a monetary focus and a product-centric focus. Then the last point is, I would like to certainly see frameworks and systems whereby perhaps we can interchange, if the use of upper ontologies is done in a particular framework, in a particular information system. I would like to see a system whereby you can perhaps either mix and match or swap in and swap out without any downstream negative impact on the data annotation and other applications. So that might avoid all of these other contentious business-minded adversarial approaches, if you can swap in upper-level concepts or your own. That would be an interesting visioned framework. Thanks again. Over.
Yeah, this is Steve. I will say that I completely agree that I would say the majority of integration efforts of ontologies don't require agreement on the same upper ontology. I'd say for pragmatic applications, in fact, I think Doug Linnett said this at the 2006 summit. He said, middle ontologies is really where we need to think about interoperation. You can think about the universe and time and space and everything else in all kinds of different ways, but you can still do financial transactions or manufacturing engineering or something like that quite happily at the middle level. So I would agree with Robert's mention of that. From an experiential point of view, this QUDT ontology I've been working on for quite a while now, units of measure, is adopted by lots of different people, even though it turns out we don't align with the way we treat things as with the BFO. The IOF group itself has built a guide for how to use QUDT, even though it doesn't align at the upper level. There's a mapping process. Todd, you may be familiar with that Milos, among others, wrote a little guide for that. I think that's it's kind of the fact that you can still use it. You're compatible at the middle level, even if, and we don't even have an upper ontology for QUDT, and in fact, some other standards use QUDT, don't have an upper ontology. They're standards for a variety of things. So I'm kind of take a pragmatist view of that. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Very valuable.
We are obviously run very over. Do you want to continue discussing? I mean, or should we finally come to an adjournment? Okay, so we will
adjourn.
I certainly want to
else?
thank the panel and Ken.
Yeah.
And
thanks
Ken.
to everyone.
Thank
Especially
the
to
panel
our
and
panelists. And all of their insights, and I think this has been a valuable retrospective, and it can be very useful now as we go on to the rest of this summit and to future summits. So thanks to everyone for contributing to this effort, and hope to see you all next Wednesday. I hope I'll get the date right this time. So bye to everyone.